Hello, my name is Naomi Huffman, and I'm here today to talk about the way that we can apply conflict theory to student achievement in Wisconsin schools, focusing specifically on funding disparities in public education and their implications for student success. In order to focus on these issues, it's important to answer several questions. First of all, what connections can we make between funding disparities and problems with student achievement, particularly in rural and inner city schools? Next, how can we solve these problems to fulfill the mandate of the Wisconsin Constitution to provide equal education to all students in Wisconsin public school districts? In order to answer these questions, first we must look at the social forces that have created the problems. Social conflict theory is one of the three main sociological paradigms. This theory looks at society as a constant competition for scarce resources. In context of this study that we're doing, the scarce resources discussed are funds for public education. Karl Marx, who is seen as the father of social conflict theory, saw the conflict as between two social classes, those who controlled the means of production and those who did the work. The struggle then is one in which the group which currently controls the scarce resources struggles to keep that control, while those who do the work struggle to gain some of the resources that are being withheld from them. Marx, of course, argued that eventually this struggle would lead to revolution and the emergence of a new social order in which there would be equal control of the resources in a classless society. Some sociologists argue that Marx's approach to social class is too simplistic, since he focused only on economic control. Since education and student achievement is a complex issue, it may be important to go beyond Marx and look elsewhere to gain a deeper understanding of the social problems which play a role in disparity in education. Max Weber also focused some of his work on conflict theory, and unlike Marx, Weber went beyond economic influences in explaining social classes and their interactions. According to Weber, the organization of groups into social classes creates inequality. Weber believed that this inequality is established and maintained by economic forces, but he also included political power and religious forces in what creates and maintains that inequality. Now that we have seen the basics of social conflict theory according to Marx and Weber, let's take a look at how these theories can be applied to education in particular. The theories of Marx and Weber are both relevant to exploring, understanding, and solving the problems of funding disparities and their impacts on student achievement in Wisconsin. Karl Marx's views on education are completely in line with his theory of class struggle. Marx believed that the education system was set up to encourage inequality, allowing for an education which would naturally move students into two groups that were needed to maintain capitalism: the ruling elite and the working class. Although opportunity was limited for those destined to be part of the working class, the elites hide this fact by promoting the myth that in school everyone has the opportunity to succeed. Funding disparity would seem a natural path, according to Marx, since working class individuals only need basic skills to do their jobs. The focus in funding would go to the upper classes, since they were the ones who needed advanced education to maintain the class inequality for future generations. This work on education can help us to understand how our education system has ended up where it is, but does not show a clear path to solving the problems of inequality. Max Weber, on the other hand, focused on social action, the idea that understanding of causes must go hand in hand with examining and producing solutions. It is not enough to simply point out problems. Sociologists must study problems in order to seek solutions. Although this aspect of Weber's study is more functionalist than conflict-based, it can help to guide our understanding of the need for solutions and problems. Weber's study of power and authority plays a role in our attempts to address the issue of educational disparity. He believed that an educational system is itself a bureaucracy with its own power structure. This structure can make the system complex and make it harder to solve problems. Weber also addressed the idea that educational problems have multiple causes, and its importance changes dependent upon the group seeking education. Due to multiple causes and varying levels of importance of education, dependent on the group, solving the problems of education will not be easy. Let's shift gears now and take a brief look at the history of educational funding in Wisconsin. According to the 1848 Wisconsin Constitution, public education should focus on the establishment of district schools which shall be as nearly uniform as practicable. Unfortunately, over the last 170 years, Wisconsin has struggled to fulfill this mandate. Today, Wisconsin's educational system is far from equal, providing a lopsided ability for students to find success. Student success varies greatly, and although funding is not the only cause, funding disparities must be addressed as a partial cause for a disparity in student achievement in Wisconsin schools. The major source of public funding has almost always been local property taxes. Although this is a logical source for funding school districts, since a district would receive the funds from their own communities, there is a problem in districts where property values are low and continue to decrease, mainly in inner city and rural districts. Since the 1990s, Wisconsin has been using the same funding formula for the distribution of state education funding. The major problem resulting from the use of this formula is that it does not take into consideration major shifts in population, industry, and cost of living. Also, it has an imbalance as those districts who had temporarily increased funding the year the formula was set, due to building projects, among other things, now have permanently higher funding to the detriment of other districts without this advantage. Because of a decrease in state spending, districts have become increasingly dependent upon passing funding referendums, which means they are at the mercy of the voting public. In suburban areas with younger family populations, it is much easier for districts to get referendums to increase property tax contributions to education passed. However, in rural areas with aging populations and in inner city districts where many families barely make enough to support their families from paycheck to paycheck, it is difficult to convince voters that the idea of increasing taxes will benefit the community as a whole. Many schools who need additional funding must jump through further hoops in order to prove that they are in need of the funding programs offered by the state, and then must compete with other districts to prove they are the most deserving of these funds. Many of these schools, in order to focus on getting these funds, use some of their current funds on administrative staff whose jobs are to file paperwork to get additional funding. This money would be better spent hiring more qualified staff to increase student achievement. In addition to the above issues with funding schools equitably, Wisconsin has in recent decades began to focus and divert public funds to non-public schools. Wisconsin has built a large system of charter schools, most of which are publicly funded. These schools become competition for public school district funds. Also, Wisconsin has begun and recently expanded a voucher system, which allows private and even religious schools to be eligible for public funds as options for Wisconsin students. If a student attends a charter or private voucher school, the state funds which normally would go to the public school instead are given to these alternative schools. This, of course, is in line with Marx and his belief in class struggle. The suburban schools have students most likely to control the economy in the future, so it makes sense that they get the funding. In Max Weber's opinion, sociological studies should remain separate from politics. However, there is no doubt that politics play a huge role in influencing society. That has definitely been the case in education in Wisconsin. Here, there has also been an increase in political ideology and its influence on the education system. The ongoing battle between Republicans and Democrats at the state level have left the public education system strangling in the balance. The use of school report cards, which measure standardized test results, school populations, and overall student achievement from district to district, are used as a measurement of student success and a determining factor in public funding. The testing is established by politicians, most of whom have no backgrounds in education. Districts are expected to run as businesses, and there is competition for survival, similar to the idea of social evolution. Schools that are considered failing, according to the report cards, are constantly at risk of being closed, and combined with surrounding districts, which leads to even longer bus rides and length of school days for students just to get an education. Over the last decade, public education has faced additional problems resulting from something that was promoted as done to solve funding problems. Since a large portion of any business is personnel costs, Wisconsin passed Act 10, which took away the teachers' union's ability to collectively bargain for increasing salaries and require educators to pay more of the insurance costs previously paid for by district funds. The consequences of this on funding disparity and student achievement are just being realized. The more experienced teachers retired early, leaving districts with few or no experienced educators. Fewer experienced or well-educated teachers are willing to teach in rural or inner-city districts because those districts are not able to pay better wages and provide good benefits. Fewer college students are willing to enter the education field or stay and teach in Wisconsin after getting their licenses, leading to teacher deficits. These deficits in turn led the state to relax its requirements for educator licensing. All of these consequences result in problems with student achievement. If students have fewer well-educated teachers, they will not have the same educational opportunity. A natural consequence of decreasing the availability of public funding is cutting of available programs in schools. Schools have cut back to the bare necessities, removing fine arts education and technical programs, which would enable students the equal opportunity mandated by the Wisconsin Constitution. Without quality educators, it is difficult to offer the same level of courses as can be offered in well-funded suburban districts. Although Marx would argue that this makes sense in a capitalist society, making sense doesn't mean that we have to just accept it. Although Wisconsin is not nearly the worst state in the U.S. in terms of funding disparity, this issue, in connection to the effects it has on already struggling districts, has created a major problem for minority students in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the worst state in the U.S. in the achievement gap for minority students, particularly male students of color. In a study of 2013-2014 testing results, just over 15% of black students tested proficient in math, compared to 43% of white students. Graduation rates for black students are around 66% in Wisconsin, where white students are above 90%. Although reasons for student achievement gaps have more sources than simply funding, we cannot ignore the achievement differences between well-funded and underfunded schools. Students in suburban schools in Wisconsin regularly test higher than those in rural and inner-city schools. Charter and voucher schools, who can selectively choose the students they admit, add to this problem by creating a brain drain from these already struggling districts. With all of these problems, how can we change the funding to begin the process of fulfilling the promise of equality of opportunity for all students? So what can we do to solve the problem of funding disparity and hopefully change student achievement opportunities in Wisconsin? Well, unfortunately, Marx's idea of a revolution is not a practical one in addressing the problems of funding disparity in schools. This is a complex problem that must have complex solutions. Some possibilities to consider in addressing this problem are as follows. One possible solution could be found in readdressing the funding formula that has not been changed in more than 30 years. Finding a formula that fits with Wisconsin's current economic and social distribution of population would be instrumental in working toward ending funding disparity. Also, in line with Weber's ideas, education and any social policy should be separate from politics. Students' abilities to access education should not depend upon which political party is in power. It should be based upon a need to encourage equality, as Wisconsin's founders originally intended. With the above idea in mind, another path to solving the problems would be to remove all of the individual additional funding programs. These programs promote competition instead of school districts working together to find opportunities for all students. These funds should be built into the funding formula. If this happens, it would open up school funds to more teachers and programs to give students better opportunities, rather than encouraging districts to expand their administration at the expense of teaching positions. The state should also offer better incentives to experienced educators who commit to teach for an extended time in underfunded districts. This could end or at least slow the stream of teachers leaving these districts, which further compounds student achievement issues. Charter school program opportunities should be moved into regular public schools, returning funding and opportunity to all students within a district, not just those chosen to attend a charter school. There should also be a reduction and eventual removal of the voucher system. This would also return funding to schools in order to allow better opportunities for student achievement. Finally, the state and individual school districts should promote school-community relationships, which will allow the general public to see all the positives that are happening in schools, which will benefit the whole community. The more the community sees the benefits of a school district, the more willing they will be to invest in the success of those schools. These solutions cannot be reached overnight, but with all the work and steps taken to increase better opportunities for student successes and allow for a stronger focus on all students achieving, not just achievement in certain districts, it is possible. Both Marx and Weber believed that equality was important but would be difficult to achieve. It is up to us to find a path to that success, and these ideas will help us to determine a starting point for the long road to fixing the problems.